once we've got all the members seated. Okay. Right, thank you very much. Councillor Bates, would you be happy to, if we could start the meeting? Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. So we have had apologies from Phil Almendinger, who is not able to attend today. And I'm now going to ask if any of the board members have any declarations of interest. Sorry? You can't hear. The microphone is on, and I'm afraid I don't have that ability. I will speak as clearly as I can. Is that any better if I sort of speak closer to the microphone? Yes, okay. Thank you. So are there any declarations of interest on items? Obviously, as we go along, you're invited to declare any items that might occur to you. I have the minutes from the last meeting, starting at page 3 of the agenda pack. I'll just run through each page. If you could make any comments as we go through. Page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, and page 13. So no comments. You're all happy that this is an accurate record of the meeting? I agree. Thank you very much. So now at this point, we have public questions. We have several questions on Histon Road and one question on the Madingley Road project, which I think would be better if we took them at those items. However, I believe that Councillor Scutt wanted to make some comments now at this point, as she is unable to stay for the whole meeting. So if you could come forward, thank you very much.
Yes, I repeat that I am very appreciative of being able to go at this stage. Thank you. I'm here as the chair of Milton Road Local Liaison Forum because the Histon Road project impacts on Milton Road, and we realise that the Milton Road project will impact on Histon Road. So there are several points that we would like to raise. Under the construction phase, we do understand the need to have the period shortened, and we applaud the shortening of the period, although it does mean that the incoming side will be stopped, the incoming traffic will be stopped, and we therefore recognise that there will be an impact on Milton Road because traffic will be coming down Milton Road that was going down Histon Road. So we do want to draw attention to the impact of the cars, which will include potentially heavy HGVs and coaches, as well as more cars, and we wish to draw that to attention that some measures need to be taken to ensure that the rat running doesn't occur. Also, we note that there will be diversion of buses from Histon Road, the number 8 in particular, and the B bus, and these buses will be coming down Milton Road, potentially adding to the congestion and the pollution. And we also wish to raise the impact that those buses may well have on the safety of cyclists, because many cyclists do come down Milton Road, and there's authority from the residents of Milton Road. In particular, I pay tribute to Maureen Mace, who's undertaken a study that there are more than 500 bicycles, sometimes per hour, coming down Milton Road. They tend to come in the bus lane, and if the 8 and the City 8 and the B bus are coming down Milton Road in that bus lane, they're not stopping, and that will create danger for cyclists. There is a suggestion that the cyclists can go over to the lane on the other side. However, that lane is very narrow, and therefore it doesn't seem like the best solution. Also, I'd like to draw attention to the potential overlap. There was a suggestion that there would be overlap of the Histon Road project construction and the Milton Road project construction. We understand that that proposition is perhaps no longer on the table, but what we would like to say is that if it isn't on the table anymore, then we would like an explicit statement from the Executive Board to confirm absolutely that there won't be any overlap in construction of those two projects. If there is to be overlap, then we would like notice ahead of time exactly what the overlap would be and the ability for the local liaison forum to be consulted and to give feedback, whether it's critical feedback or appreciative or positive feedback. We think that both are important. Also, I would like simply to say that the reason that the Milton Road project and the Histon Road project are going ahead in the positive, ultimately, way that they are is because really from the outset, when residents became involved, the process has been a positive one, and we appreciate that very much. And it wouldn't have been the positive project if there hadn't been that interaction. And what's happened on both, if we can call them sides, in terms of the project team, as it were, and the partnership, and the local liaison forum and the residents and the local liaison forum have been constructive and have ceded to some points that were not the most happy from our point of view. But we also recognise that the project management and the Greater Cambridge Partnership Board and Assembly have accommodated to residents' concerns that weren't on the table at the outset. Therefore, we do want this process to continue, and I would propose the possibility, well, number one, there must be consultation with the local liaison forums as the project construction moves forward, and number two, perhaps this is a time when the local liaison forum Histon Road and the local liaison forum Milton Road might meet together with the officers for the explanation, the consultation and the feedback to be given. Because they're so intertwined or interlinked, that may be the best way as the project moves forward. And I would end by saying this, that we do request that the board take into account the concerns that are being raised by both Histon Road and Milton Road in relation to the construction phase, because the construction phase is effectively the end point of the beginning and the beginning of the end point that we hope to have in the future. And if the consultation stops now, it won't be the positive project that it can be if we continue to be consulted during the construction phase, both of Histon Road and Milton Road. So again, I thank you very much for allowing me to speak early at this time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your comments. Obviously, we've got lots of other questions on this, so but I think it would be worth responding to several of your points at this now. So before I come to Peter, could I just ask Councillor Bates to make a comment?
Oh. Thank you for coming, Josh. Some of those comments I think need to be forwarded as you've described them when it comes to the closures, about diversions, about signs, about bus routes, etc. Can I please ask you to email that, please copy in the executive and Peter Blake, to Sonia Hanson and Richard Lumley, because the County Council, through the street works, do all that sort of work. So I think you need to bring it to the attention of Sonia and Richard, and they can work with Peter as we go forward in the construction. I'll give you a personal view only on Milton Road, Histon Road. In my view, there should be a gap between one finishing and one starting. The question will be, I think, is what is that gap? That's a personal view I might add at this moment.
Thank you. We thank you for the personal view and hope that ultimately the personal view might become the view of the Executive Board. And thank you for... We'll get in touch with Sonia and with Richard Lumley. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Blake, would you like to make any comments on
I suppose just a couple. In terms of, we're acutely aware of the potential impacts and a lot of the sort of discussion at the Joint Assembly, and I won't steal the chair of the Joint Assembly's thunder, focused on that and what mitigations we can come forward with. Echo the point that you raised around the bus services in particular, the point that was raised around the overlap, but particularly the issue around ongoing dialogue. So we're not about to grasp defeat from the jaws of victory. So we will continue with the discussion and dialogue with both liaison forums going forward, both pre, during, and indeed post construction.
That would be appreciated, because I should also note that we were somewhat discombobulated by the fact that there wasn't a local liaison forum before for Milton Road before the proposal was made that there be a shortened period for Histon Road with the closure of one of the lanes, because that would directly impact on Milton Road, and we would have appreciated being consulted before that. But we do affirm, along with you, that the agreement that there will be ongoing consultation. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thanks. That's very helpful. Thank you. So yes, we will come back to the other questions at the relevant points in the agenda. And so we now have the feedback from the Joint Assembly, and over to Councillor Witherspoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm not going to take very long over this. What I am going to say, though, is that it is indicated by the proportions given to the various items in my report. That shows you what extensive consideration the Joint Assembly gave to the quarterly monitoring report, quarterly progress report. So I do commend to you the references that I make here to careers advice, data from Mill Road closure, local and regional transport consultations and the interaction between them, highways advice to determination of planning applications, and indeed the input into section 106 discussions, and the capacity of energy infrastructure and the need to treble it if we're going to have the sort of switch to electric vehicles that we're hoping for. Now, I can't see Ian Manning and colleagues in the audience. Are they not presenting to you today?
We are not going to have a full presentation as you had, because several of us were there, and
I wasn't primed to give you a full report on what they said. All I will say, though, is that it was superb, absolutely superb. It was very much appreciated. The articulation that we witnessed was quite splendid, and so there's those 3 paragraphs there probably don't really do justice to the welcome that they received, because I could be very effusive about the wonderful work that they have done and commissioned by us and the County Council. I think there were 2 sessions to the County Council itself, I think, on the other project, because there are twin tracking projects. One's on air quality, and I say Ian's nodding. He may do. There was some, and it has cropped up since, that perhaps there wasn't as much emphasis on rail as a modal opportunity as there might have been, and the argument was made that since the sort of sunset for this project was 2030, that the way glacial speed at which rail infrastructure improvements occur suggested that rail wouldn't be able to make a significant contribution to improving air quality. But the report before you does give the recommendations that they make for the switch to electric vehicles and to public transport and active modes. And I do commend that work to you. The full report, I hope there's a link. I think there's a link in your paper. I strongly recommend reading the full report. Okay, so that takes me on to Histon Road bus cycling and walking improvements. And given that Lillian is here, and I know she's going to take me to task for not emphasising the environmental opportunities that the scheme promotes, so I'm going to leave it entirely to her to fill you in from the local liaison forum point of view. The members themselves had concerns. Well, they picked up the concerns from residents along Histon Road about parking, their wish to be assured about the routing of HCVs during the works, their fear that a streamlined road might lead to traffic exceeding speed limits. And then the members of the for villages outside Cambridge City, some were particularly concerned on behalf of sixth form students from the villages north of Cambridge, some of whom already have to leave home at 7 o'clock in the morning. And the disruption that closing Histon Road inbound would have on their studies was causing them some anxiety. Of course, there are commuters approaching Cambridge from many points north of Impington, Histon, Cottenham, Milton, Landbeach and Waterbeach, and they too have concerns which I'm sure will feed into the sort of work that Councillor Bates mentioned in reply to Councillor Scott. Okay, so that was Histon Road, and then the Madingley Road walking and cycling project. Everyone seemed very keen to take that forward. Some were looking forward to much improved cycling experience, especially outwards from Cambridge, because there isn't a dedicated cycle lane on the outward side of Madingley Road at the moment. And having passed that route within the last 60 minutes, I can vouch for the fact it's not a pleasant experience. And others stressed the need to reach students in any consultation exercise.
Thank you very much indeed. That's excellent, and thank you again for your the excellent report that is included in the agenda for today, and more broadly to the Assembly for this extremely good input that I think has influenced what we're talking about today. So now we have the quarterly progress report, which I think I will hand immediately over to Neve. Matthews, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We've got a colleague, David, here from Finance, if there's any specific questions on finance issues. Thanks, Councillor Witherspoon, for setting out the rather long context of the report. Much appreciated. Maybe it'd be helpful if I move to the one approval that we're asking as part of the report, which is on the research that we're recommending that we contribute towards on careers advice. So it's in the paper, but very briefly, what I think we have learnt through the skills work that we've done and the experts that we've asked is that really there isn't enough. We don't know enough about the provision of careers advice that's out there. So this proposal goes some way to trying to fill that gap. It will look at the advice that is given in schools, try and kind of describe that, and then look to understand the quality of it. And I think subject to that piece of work, we could use that to look at where we can intervene, perhaps in that area. So if there's any questions on what we're asking to approve, I'd be happy to take those.
Before we vote, I think there's one add on the air pollution and congestion report, which Councillor Witherspoon was talking about. They have been in contact with us subsequently and with some additional comments about ensuring that as the outcomes about quantifying CO2 targets and looking a bit more at the road freight impacts, which I think we can bring into the city access work as that progresses as well. So that's sort of just point to note on that. Are there any comments from board members on any aspects of the quarterly report at this stage? Yes, Councillor Bates.
It's really on skills, actually. I noticed it's on page 33, which is actually the companies who are interested. Perhaps what I was going to suggest, actually, bearing in mind Cambridgeshire and Cambridge in particular and South Cambs has a lot of construction going on, building construction, whether it be houses or other, I would have perhaps liked to have seen some greater input from construction companies. I'll give you because I think actually that is a gap. you look at the current building on the A14, I think about 75% of the staff who are building the A14 come from the country. And only a very small percentage comes locally. So actually, perhaps what I'm asking, actually, Chairman, is there some more work that we could do with construction? Now, whether those are developers, whether those are the house builders, I don't have a strong view, but it is certainly, I think, a gap in the people that have come forward. So I'd like to see perhaps not 9, but a few more added to 9, 10, 11, 12 that to come back. And just to round off a little bit about Mill Road, I just left the presentation by Cambridge University with Mill Road as well, and I'm going to take that issue up because I'm not sure we're joined up between what the county's doing and what you're doing and what the university's doing, but what I was just hearing as I left. So I think there's a bit of work there, possibly about data and data collection as well. Skills, I think, is something I think we do need to perhaps concentrate a little bit more on construction.
Could you possibly give us a brief update on the work that has been doing? Because I'm aware that there has been work on construction.
Yeah, sure. So these 1 to 9 companies are companies that have signed a pledge, and they've been Form the Future have approached them and asked them to sign a pledge to recruiting some additional apprentices. Form the Future are continuing to engage with a number of different companies across a number of different sectors, but I will talk to them away from here and just ask how they're targeting construction companies to see if we can generate a bit of interest in that particular industry. Yeah. So we're talking to Homes England, for example, on Northstowe. Yeah. And trying to understand how, what Form the Future can do specifically on that site to channel a few more apprentices that way.
Okay, thank you very much. Just a brief word for everybody speaking on the mic is apparently the acoustics are not doing so well today. So if you could just make sure that you are close to the mic when you speak. Thank you. I think it's general, not everybody, not specifically, and don't take it personally. Are there any other comments on the quarterly report? Yes, Claire.
Very briefly and into the microphone, I hope. I have really valued the step up that the Joint Assembly has made to scrutinising quite so well. So whereas we would have come normally with a load of questions, they've actually already been asked and answered. So we're not disinterested. We're just admiring the work of the Joint Assembly. There are a couple of points in their report which I totally agree with. For example, the Grand report, we should be looking at the post-review as well as the pre-review. So that will be a really useful piece of work, and I would hope that we add it to our list for the future work to be funded.
Yes. Thank you. Councillor Witherspoon.
I'm blushing, Chairman, but I thank Claire very much for that commendation. And I'd just like to say then that the Joint Assembly members really welcomed the opportunity to take a strategic overview of the whole City Deal programme. And while you've spent 10 minutes on it, we spent an hour and a half, and I'd like to pat ourselves on the back that in the context of the upcoming Gateway Review, it illustrates the value of having a Joint Assembly to do the deep dive, to spare you having to duplicate our work.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you very much. That's a point very well made. Okay, thank you. So we will now look at the recommendations on page 27 of the report. As Niamh said, we are noting several things, and the one actual substantive decision is approving this contribution towards the RAND work on careers advice. So is the board happy with those recommendations? Agreed? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the excellent report really, yes, thank you. So, thank you. So we now have, moving on to the Histon Road item, which I'll just get to myself. And so we are going to, just to go through there are several stages to this. So we'll be starting off with the report from the chair of the local liaison forum. Then we will have our public questions and we'll get some responses to those questions. Oh, do come forward while I'm talking. don't wait. And then we'll have a presentation for the officers, and then we will have our own discussion on this. Just before you start, I will also mention that we've received a statement from Councillor Cheney Payne, who wasn't able to attend, so we will be taking that into account too. Lillian, if you could just give us a little update from the point of view of the local liaison forum, that would be very kind. Thank you. Yeah, sorry, Vice Chair, apologise, yes. And then try and get it close to you so that everybody can hear. Yes, thank you.
Of course. So after my report to the Joint Assembly, following issues are still not solved. In the recommendations to the Executive Board on the 3rd of October, there is no reference to bio. A little bit here because there were actually noted the questions from the councillors and in the meeting there. Of course, I don't think I would recommend the edible wildflowers on that tarmac stretch that we're going to have. So 4.1. Subject to high water levels similar to those of Darwin Green was raised by the local residents a long time ago. They question what will happen when the massive reduction of hedges and trees and plus root disturbances between Carisbrook Road and Blackwell Road were implemented. The 514 and 15 an arboricultural survey has been undertaken, but no biodiversity. In particular, the stretch between Brownlow and Blackwell Roads, where an enormous loss of wildlife will happen. There are countless numbers of trees and massive hedges providing wildlife habitats. So will there be any birds in the spring? The uncertainty about which design is valid is huge. Present drawings show a design with trees between the panels, which has been cancelled in a meeting with the residents. No new design has been presented. Thus, there are no trees planned for Brownlow to Blackwell Road area. But there is a good thing. It is the 3-meter-high living fence implemented to safeguard the residents now. 5.16, Skanska Appendix D, regarding site clearance in November 2019 on page 151-200. Clearance of vegetation. It's a crucial thing that the information of the removal of the tree greenery is carried out in an empathic, oh, I misspelled that, okay, manner when contacting the residents and in good time. That is important, in good time before the clearance. In these climate crisis days, it should have been obvious that the design should focus more on the importance of a tree canopy and to retain the wildlife habitats more carefully. The benefits of trees for carbon sequestration and summer cooling and removing air pollution and providing homes for birds and insects and other wildlife is and are well known. Management of species diversity and placing the right tree in the right place are important considerations that's highlighted by the Cambridge canopy. It is important for people's health and well-being. And where are the promises of a welcoming avenue of trees into the historical center of Cambridge? It's lost. Further comments regarding the Histon Road final design. There's been a question from Benson Ara that has been submitted regarding urban clearway instead of a double yellow lines. Since this is a part will be in the latter sequences of building the road, it will be time enough to revisit this GRO and also see if the urban clearway could fit in. So, did you know that in the times before cars existed, that parking actually stood for planting trees, park land? That is a different thing of interpreting what parking is. The installation of the NAPR systems on Histon and Milton Road, greatly appreciated, thank you. New bus priority in technology, greatly appreciated. It is not easy for a mobility scooter and a box cycle to meet on the footpath of 1.4 meter. I'm sorry. 510, there is a question from H. Rara regarding race tables on Windsor Road that has been submitted. 516, on question to Skanska regarding how residents on Blackhall Road will have to drive to get to the post office on the opposite Hazelwood Close during the inbound closure. Following was received, and I think you have received a map showing the details of it. It is quite a long diversion. And however, Skanska has promised that those that are disabled or elderly will be contacted and helped across the road. It's okay, but it's not a perfect solution, is it? 518 is, will the bus service be available before the inbound lane closure? And one more thing which isn't written here. Please save some money, maintenance money for Histon Road to mend and repair our new road after the onslaught of the diversion traffic from Milton Road. That would be very nice to know that it was something spared for us afterwards. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed for that. That's very helpful indeed. So we'll pick up those points during the responses to the questions and during the debate if we could. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So we now have a series of questions. I'll just find my copy of the set of questions. We have 7 altogether on this project. So if I could ask first of all Simon Owens to come to the table. Simon here? No? Okay. In that case, we will do a written response to that question in any case. Now, the next is Councillor Frank Morris. Could you come forward? Thank you. Good afternoon. You know how it all works?
I think so. Yeah, thank you. I was trying to work out where the executive board actually is, but I think I've got that worked out now.
Yes. Us two and two over there. Yes.
Yes, Claire, I know you very well. And just to complete the picture, I'm chairman of the parish council in Cottenham. And for those of you who don't know, Cottenham is about 6-7 miles north of Cambridge and is one of the largest villages in South Cambridgeshire, alongside the village immediately south, which is Histon and Impington as a parish, with another 8,000 people. So roughly 15,000 people whose economy obviously depends partly and to a significant extent on Cambridge. And a lot of traffic comes through from us and even further north. But the question and context is, Cottenham Parish Council is extremely concerned by the prospect of serious disruption for residents of Cottenham and the neighbouring villages who rely on smooth operation of the B1049, that's the northern part of Histon Road, as a result of the proposed roadworks on Histon Road within Cambridge. We question whether the partnership and its consultants have the authority, supporting evidence, and justification for such a hugely disruptive project. In particular, has the partnership the authority to close the public highway for over a year, with disruption extending beyond the partnership boundaries? And in addition, have you complied with European Union procurement rules by this friendly handoff to the County Council to implement the project with Skanska? Second, have you consulted properly and recently on the social and economic ramifications of the project, which affects communities as far north as Wilburton and Ely, who were not consulted at all? Have you assessed properly delays to the City 8 bus route which seems to be an additional 5 miles on its route, if rumours are to be believed. Consider the societal implications for blue light services served by Cottenham's fire station and ambulances delivering patients to Addenbrooke's. You may not know Cottenham's fire service is a strategic one, and it backs up the whole system. As Cambridge is drawn in, we come in to help behind them. Then the list of uncoordinated disruption, the existing and ongoing A14 project, whose frequent and varying road closures and diversions already create significant disruption. The fragility of the A10, whenever disruptions occur there, huge amounts of traffic are thrown onto our B1049. The ongoing roadworks within Cottenham on our arterial roads to upgrade our gas infrastructure and facilitate the delivery of 500 unplanned new homes over the next few years. And then the precarious state of the C190, which links Cottenham to Waterbeach Station, for the only rail link we have. And taken proper account of the limited numbers of people who can take advantage of the cycle routes. So although there are benefits to cyclists, the benefits in one sense are disproportionate to the number of people through ability, choice or distance can take advantage of them. And finally, accounted for these wider disbenefits when assessing the project's value for public money. So in conclusion, the project appears to have only minor benefits and massive disbenefits, and we request a moratorium on this and other expensive projects that have a wide geographic impact until the full social and economic implications have been properly assessed in consultation with the wider community and a true value for money appraisal has been published. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Morris. What I would propose to do actually is to take all of the questions. There's quite a lot of overlap between the questions, and then we can get a response in full to all of the questions. So thank you very much indeed. Next we have Councillor Neil Goff. Thank you. Good afternoon. So if you just launch into your question when you're...
Sorry,
Do start your question when you're ready.
Okay.
Apologise.
Thank you. Even from here, it's difficult to hear. Our question relates to the mitigation measures during the works. The impact on people who have to travel by public transport will be greatest. One such group, particular concern to us, is young people seeking to access post-16 educational opportunities in Cambridge. These young people already face journey times of up to 90 minutes from Cottenham to Cambridge on a good day. The planned Stagecoach City H diversion is hopeless. For Cottenham and Rampton, the diversion via Milton Road will extend travel times at peak and shoulder, such that the City 8 will become practically unusable. The young people of Cottenham deserve a special focus. I draw your attention to the paper which went to the Communities and Partnership Committee of the County Council on May 30th of this year. The topic, tackling poverty and improving social mobility. The highest concentration of child poverty in the South Cambridgeshire, Cottenham. In tackling the poverty action plan, priority number 5 identifies the importance of enabling people to travel to education. For a cohort of young people in our ward, absent mitigation, they are just about to face a huge barrier being erected between where they live and access to the educational opportunities they aspire to. It's current year 11s who will be most impacted by this and will be facing the decisions about their educational choices right now. We're not questioning the merit of the scheme, but we are suggesting that the mitigation measures have not been given sufficient attention and weight. Let's not play fast and loose with young people's opportunities. They are too important to assume that it will work out okay in the end. We request that you please ask officers to come back with a really effective mitigation plan and commit now to fund it to ensure that the cohort of young people in Cottenham and Rampton and the surrounding villages do not have to face lifetime consequences of not being able to access the educational opportunities that they need to. We've offered a solution embedded in our question to try and mitigate these effects, and which will also have the related benefit of solving a problem for Histon and Impington in terms of capacity on the busway as well. Our question is really, has the alternate bus route option through Oakington onto the guided busway, or alternate peak hour schemes being considered and discussed with the bus companies? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for that question. Yes, and we will come back to that at the end when we've had all the questions. Thank you. Next we have Lillian Rundblatt again. If you would be happy to come forward and ask your question in your another capacity. Okay.
So this is Histon Road Local Shopping Centre and Community Hub. It's priority for pedestrians. We are all very grateful for all the enhancement of the streetscape just surrounding the Aldi Island and the Ackerman Street. And I'm sure you have read our argumentation here, so I won't have to repeat all of it. But there is then the change that the outbound bus has been moved over to the co-op stores area and the increased crossings for Windsor Road. This movement has not been matched with the proper raised tables in this crossing. Compared to Ackerman Street, the raised table is between 5.5 wide and Windsor Road is 6.2. And I don't believe that the spacing over there really is that important. It is sufficient space to lengthen the area to do raised tables. So the Histon Road project priorities are to improve cycling and walking, and not additional cars. Cars turning from Histon Road into Windsor Road are commuters using this cut-through, or running, shouldn't say that word, to get to Huntingdon Road, and shouldn't have the priority over people walking or arriving by bus to this important community hub. Don't let this opportunity to create a perfect meeting place for local residents, youngsters going to the ballet school, shoppers coming by foot or by bus, stopping and saying hello or have a cup of coffee over at the coffee tree, to be stopped by an unsafe crossing for the pedestrians. So, HRR requests that the improvement of the design for the pedestrian crossing by Histon Road and Windsor Road be redesigned to a proper raised table crossing, please. Thank you.
I apologise. Well, thank you very much indeed. Now we have Dr. Judith Perry. If you could just come forward and I don't know if you've operated one of these microphones before. There's a button at the in the middle at the bottom which you can press, and then you can speak. And there was a traffic light system where after 3 minutes it goes red, but I'm sure you've got plenty of time anyway. Thank you.
Uniquely, along Histon Road, the southern end of from the Grapes Pub to Domino's Pizza, 0.2 of a mile long, or 1 minute for a cyclist to drive by, is lined with tightly packed Victorian houses and businesses. The carriageway is narrow, meaning there's only room for an advisory cycle lane. The proposed double yellow lines means that during the most dangerous time for cyclists, the morning and evening peak rush hours, stopping and standing to load and unload will be allowed, endangering cyclists as cars, taxis, vans, and lorries will be free to pull in and out, and the cyclists will be endangered by the opening and closing of doors and vehicles pulling in and out into the narrow carriageway. Traffic will be impeded, and the cyclists will preferentially choose to ride in the middle of the carriageway. The introduction of a time-limited urban causeway will prevent this. Vehicles are only allowed to pick up or drop off a passenger and not allowed to stop at all. No loading or unloading is allowed. Thus, at the most critical times of the day, cyclists will be as safe as is possible and traffic will flow freely. The houses and businesses along this stretch of the road do not have off-street parking, and they depend for the normal conduct of their lives on the availability of close-by parking for visitors, including carers, for deliveries, for repairmen working in and on their houses, for clients of the businesses. And so the parking is needed. It's not close by. The parked cars along this stretch act as important noise, vibration, and pollution buffers for the houses, deflecting the worst of the exhaust fumes from direct entry into the property. These issues, raised by residents in the LLFs and in the objections to the TRO, have never been addressed by the officers, even though they are major concerns that affect the property values and the health of the residents. Reconciling the apparently conflicting needs is the goal of our proposal for a limited time urban clearway with off-peak parking allowed to service the local community. The off-peak traffic is light. Some caution will be required of the cyclists passing the parked vehicles, but given the short time, only 1 minute, that it takes to pass them and the observed ease of traffic, we feel it's a compromise worth making. Any individual cyclist in the course of a week is likely to spend at most a half hour in that vicinity. The residents are affected 24/7. We ask, therefore, that the GCP instruct the officers to develop a proposal along these lines in consultation with the local residents. This will not delay the implementation of the rest of the scheme, and it will not delay this letting of contracts for the construction.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. We'll come back to address your points. Thank you. Next, we have Barbara Taylor from the Milton Road Residents Association. Yes, so the microphone is still on, and then there's the traffic light, so after the 3 minutes, you'll have a red light.
Our question is, has modelling or a study been carried out on the ability of Milton Road and Huntington Road to carry out the extra traffic which will result from the one-way road closure and Histon Road engineering works to gauge the impact these diversions will have on Milton Road itself and on the side roads, particularly on the Arbury Road and Hurst Park estate areas. The reason for asking this question is because there doesn't seem to have been any consultation with the Milton Road Local Liaison Forum or the residents of the Milton Road area, including Hypera, of course, regarding the impact that this extra traffic will have on the area while the Histon Road engineering works are carried out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Yes, so we'll address that. And the last question on the Histon Road is from Matthew Danish from CamCycle. Good afternoon. You just turn your microphone on. There's the big button in the middle. Yes, okay.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. I speak on behalf of CamCycle. We welcome the upcoming works to Histon Road, acknowledging that it will be an improvement over present conditions. In particular, we thank officers for including a protected junction at Gilbert Road and for tackling the dangers posed by parked cars in the narrow section of road. We remain disappointed by the junction designs for King's Hedges Road and Victoria Road, which do fall short of ambitions for safety and priority. And furthermore, at side roads, the narrow raised crossings and so-called false ramp designs do not give reassurance that turning drivers will slow down for people walking there. And we are concerned that the design report claims a 1.5 meter advisory cycle lane could possibly be protected by a bus lane. We see that as a gap in provision, a section that isn't suitable for all ages and abilities. We seek reassurance that this scheme is being built in the context of a comprehensive cycling network that will connect all areas of the city and reach out to surrounding villages. The current levels of investment in cycling will continue or increase after the end of this year. All cycling schemes are intended to enable cycling and walking for people of all ages and abilities and are considering all types of journeys, not merely commutes. To achieve its transport targets and achieve facilities that genuinely work for all, we believe that the Greater Cambridge Partnership must build high-quality cycling infrastructure for all ages and abilities and fix dangerous junctions where 75% of crashes happen, and implement demand management to encourage modal shift towards the great walking, cycling, and public transport options that you're building. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Matthew. Thank you. So I would now, I'm going to ask Peter Blake to respond as comprehensively as possible to all of those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll endeavour to do that, and I'm sure you'll point out if I miss any particular issues. And to start off with the Histon Road scheme and the nature of the scheme. This has been around for some considerable period of time, as I know that Executive Board members will be aware. This has been subject to widespread consultation and enjoys, certainly in terms of the recent consultation event, widespread support. Albeit there are questions around particular detail, which I fully accept. Just to pick up on the sort of throwaway comment that was made regarding handoffs and public procurement that wasn't in the submitted question, as I understand. The County Council colleagues undertook an extensive procurement exercise for their highways consultancy framework that complies with all necessary UK and European legislation, and we are using that framework because it offers best value and it builds upon the hard work and conscientious nature of county colleagues, so we're absolutely convinced this is the right way of dealing with it. The traffic management proposals have been developed in consultation with county colleagues, as Councillor Bates outlined previously, with Stagecoach, with colleagues from Highways England on the A14. They are very much live conversations. This is a live traffic management approach. It will continue to be live until the construction has been completed. So we will continue to work on minimising the impact of all the points of that. In terms of the detail, so bringing that to life, the road closure on Histon Road will not be enacted until the works on junctions 32 to 33 of the A14 have been completed, because we're consciously aware that of the sort of the implications of that. Working with Stagecoach, so fully accept the points raised on the access issues at Cottenham. No final decisions have been taken by Stagecoach or ourselves on that. We are still looking at all the available options. Indeed, I had a discussion with the Managing Director of Stagecoach this lunchtime on this very issue, and so we will be producing public transport alternatives that seek to mitigate the impact of the changes, both for Cottenham, but also for the direct Histon Road area, because there are particular challenges that we will need to pick up on that. So those conversations and discussions are ongoing. In terms of the detailed scheme design point that Lydia raised, and members will be aware that we locked the scheme design the last time you considered this report. The issue around the raised table at that particular location raises particular concerns from scheme designers because of the access to the shop parking arrangements and the use of HGVs. Nevertheless, listening to concerns of residents, we will use different block paving to deal with that particular junction, and we will also line it to give as much perceived and real priority to pedestrians as we can. It is also worth noting that junction is significantly tightened under the arrangements, so it is far easier to cross and to deal with. In terms of the point around the free urban, I've lost my track. Clearway. I was going to say freeway, but apologies. In terms of the urban freeway, that is unnecessary in terms of the officer's opinion, and outwith of what currently exists across the rest of the city environment. Advisories and double yellow lines are entirely appropriate way of dealing with this and ensure consistency across the city to make it easier for all road users, including motorists, to adhere to. The issue is around whether there is off-peak parking allowed or not. We discussed this at length at the Joint Assembly. We've discussed this at length at previous boards in terms of the impact of delivering both public transport, walking, cycling improvements along the corridor, and the impact on local parking arrangements. And so the recommendations are as previously outlined in terms of dealing with that. and making sure that parking is dealt with as part of the residents' parking arrangements that currently exist. In terms of the detailed modelling question, detailed modelling is not undertaken on temporary traffic closure arrangements. I think there would be sort of significant questions as to the validity of any modelling on short-term benefits or disbenefits of that. Nevertheless, conversations, as I said previously, are ongoing with the Highway Authority and with colleagues at the A14 and Stagecoach in particular, and they will continue. And I think it does pick up on the point that Councillor Scott raised at the start around ongoing discussions and dialogue, because that is a necessary part of this. It doesn't stop because we get to the construction phase. Actually, if anything, certainly as we run up to construction, it needs to step up a gear. And I'll cover a little bit more of that when I go through the report. If I may, Chair. Finally, in terms of the question around the role that the Histon Road improvements play as part of a comprehensive network, and I think I gave a fairly clear response when a similar question was asked at the Joint Assembly, that the partnership is absolutely committed to the delivery of a comprehensive network of cycling that is safe, attractive, and encourages cycling across the sort of the greater Cambridge environment. There are a number of projects coming forward. Indeed, there's a project on this agenda in terms of cycle facilities along Madingley Road, but there are a number of significant projects that will up the size and scale of our cycling delivery over coming years. So we have a Greenways project that will start in terms of the board's considerations at their next meeting. We have a number of very major improvement projects for public transport, cycling and walking with Cambridge South East, Camborne to Cambridge, A10, Waterbeach and Eastern access arrangements, all of which will have segregated cycle provision as their core. So I sit here with some comfort to say that we are absolutely committed to delivering that over the remainder of the City Deal period. I hope that covers some of the main points, Chair.
That does certainly cover the main points. I hope you don't mind if I pick up just a couple of those. One that was raised by Frank Morris was about the fire station ambulances and the movements of emergency vehicles. I mean, that is being taken into account in the planning for the construction phase.
That's being taken into account, and I know that colleagues at the County Council have very strong liaison arrangements with the emergency services. And
although you're obviously in ongoing discussion with Stagecoach on the public transport arrangements, but I mean, I think one of the things that the questioners were seeking was a reassurance for people considering their options now, because people having to apply for colleges now and consider those options, is it going to be adequate for their purposes? I mean, is it going to be good enough? Obviously, you won't know for certain until we've got that finalised, but you are seeking to do more than just put the buses into a traffic jam on Milton Road and add on 45 minutes to their journey.
We are seeking to deliver a satisfactory arrangement, and there will be a number of sort of public transport services changes and enhancements we're going to have to secure to deliver that. So those discussions are ongoing. Stagecoach are being very helpful. There are a few operational issues that they are dealing with, but I anticipate being able to deliver the necessary changes as part of this scheme.
And sort of my final follow-up is about the ongoing consultations and dialogue with local communities, both immediately in the Histon Road and Milton Road area and beyond, which I'm sure your comments on that would be very welcome indeed. Just in terms of roughly the timescales that the work on those plans will be happening, is sort of next few weeks, few months, or right up until construction.
So in terms of highway construction that's going to impact on traffic, that is not going to start until the next year. We're using the process now, and if I introduce my colleague who's hiding in the back, Tom Bennett, who's leading on the communications arrangements, to produce a detailed communications plan based on our extensive experience of liaising with the local liaison forums in terms of making sure we get clear lines of communication there, making sure that we are doing letter drops, making sure that we're in discussions with local members in terms of media advertising campaigns, over the course of the period, both in the run-up to and during the construction. And that will communicate a whole host of things, Chair, such as what arrangements or what Skanska are going to be doing on site given periods of time, what road closure implications are going to be, and what the public transport changes are going to be. So that work is in progress, and I'm confident that we'll be able to share that in the near future.
Okay, that's excellent. Thank you very much indeed. We're going to move now on to the report itself. So unless there's any immediate follow-ups on the questions, that's marvellous. Okay, so thank you. Thank you very much for those clarifications. And now I imagine you've covered several of the things that you would have said at the beginning of the report anyway. But if you could just present us briefly the report.
I mean, thank you, Chair. In a sense, yes. We've talked a lot about the scheme itself. I mean, just to say, as you're aware, there's been an awful lot of work over a number of years on this scheme. The scheme has grown considerably in terms of size and scope, in large part down to discussions and liaisons with local liaison forum and local residents. I think the scheme is a better scheme for that, particularly around the public amenity, the landscaping side, and very much focusing on cycling that wasn't necessarily at the fore when we first started this. So the recommendations are outlined in 2.1, Chair, and maybe it's easier if I just deal with questions as they arise.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now we can open out the item for discussion. If you, Councillor Herbert.
Yeah, just a couple of comments and then some questions. So, Lewis, I think yeah, I'm normally a lot better. I was a lot better than this when I was in the chair, so I'll try and be as good as that. So this is a significant improvement, in my view, on the earlier discussions that were on a county scheme, which was admittedly only at its early stages 6 or 7 years ago. So overall, I think I welcome this scheme. I think obviously there's been a huge amount of input from residents, particularly in the neighbouring area, and I recognise that perhaps we've got a bit to learn in terms of engagement from people a bit further afield on these projects. We aim to do that, and we have succeeded more readily, I think, on the bigger schemes where that it is prompted more. But I'd just like to start just briefly with a couple of thank yous, including to Lillian and also to Councillor Mike Todd-Jones and the people on the LLF, because this scheme, it wouldn't be what it is without an awful lot of input. So it is a question about the balance, and I do think it's really important that this is recognised as a main cycle route, because a lot of people cycle up and down this road, as well as people, including families, including school children going to Mayfield, need to cross it. So I also particularly welcome the junction with Gilbert Road, Warwick Road and Milton and with Histon Road, because I just see that as being quite a move forward compared to junctions, and we obviously will test it out when we see it, but it is important that we make things safer. I'd like to just ask a bit more on the parking at the bottom, because I've had a dialogue and I appreciate some of the issues from people living on the Benson Road area, because there is a very well used grocery shop down the bottom end, and it's a little distant from Linden Close where there is provision for parking. And I did earlier live on both Canterbury Street and also on Halifax Road, so I do know the area. And then the other issue, I think, is just understanding what is actually going to happen in terms of communications and the impacts. I don't have in front of me a very clear piece of paperwork which says actually what is the plan during the works, and I just don't know what has been circulated or what will be circulated, Mr. Blake. I was hoping to get a bit of a contribution from Tom on that. Okay. So now that Tom's moved up to the desk, perhaps we could just get greater clarity. You can't do a scheme like this without impacts. My bigger concern is when we do the Milton Road scheme, but obviously I do want to get a bit more of an answer about exactly how is it going to be managed, because it isn't just the displacement, it's the impact on people on the roads just off Histon Road and how it's made clear to them, because their journeys and their lives are going to be significantly impacted, albeit that I think, as I recall, we will have outbound throughout the period. So I'd like to get just a chunk more information about the timing of the works, when they expect to start, what the mitigation plan is, what further discussions we're aiming to have with Stagecoach, given the fact that it is a lifeline for the villages and others to the north, and having to zigzag onto the A14 and then come down Milton Road is a particular challenge. So a bit more on that, and I'd also like to understand, whilst recognising the balance, because I do think cyclists are entitled to cycle safely along main radial routes in and out of this city, and parking does represent a real danger to them. What the parking provision is for the business at the bottom end of Histon Road. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Possibly I'd like to invite Mr. Blake and Mr. Bennett to make comments on those 2 points, on the parking and then sort of the communications, and more broadly the plan for the works.
So in terms of parking, and we discussed this certainly the last 2 times the board has considered this scheme. This was the dilemma that we faced in terms of trying to ensure that we were delivering improvements both for public transport, walking and cycling. And the impact of that, and every time I've sat here and we've discussed this, was the impact of that was on-street parking in the area. So we have worked with, through the local liaison forum and the Residents Association in terms of parking assessments, and we are of the conclusion that the way to deliver on our objective of improving cycling facility, and you heard from Cam Cycles that in terms of their perception, it is still far from perfect, but the way of delivering those improvements meant that we had to propose removing some on-street parking, and that's what this does, and that's what the scheme design does, and that's why we've worked with the community on doing that. The community have raised particular issues around loading and unloading, which is why we have tried to draw that balance and are suggesting under the traffic regulation orders that loading and unloading is allowed, because we do recognise there are particular issues. But that's very much a balance that we have to draw to deliver the benefits to the cyclists. In terms of Stagecoach, the conversations and discussions are ongoing. Stagecoach are dealing with a number of issues in the area at the moment, not least the impact on the existing busway on their operation. They, like we, are committed to providing a service that people will use through the course of the construction works. Not least, it's in their commercial interest to do that. There are a number of ways that can happen. And we are still in discussions as to what that looks like, balancing the needs, not just of the communities out of the urban area, such as we've heard from representatives from Cottenham, but also residents directly affected in the Histon Road area. Because the reality is the bus offer will not be the same for those people. As Councillor Herbert outlined, we still have the outbound option, but inbound is the issue. In terms of construction will commence in the new year, but the road closure will not take effect until Highways England complete their works on junction 32 to 33 of the A14, which is likely to be in the April-May period, because we recognise that there is significant traffic implications, and one of the options that people may very well wish to avail themselves of is the A14. So we have some time in terms of developing the communications plan, and as I've sort of briefly outlined, and I know Tom will come on to that when I shut up and pass over to him. It's very much saying, what is the impact in the local area? What are our existing liaison channels? And you've heard from representatives in terms of active ongoing discussions are very much sort of going to be welcomed. And then what's the broader media and communications offer, which we will use the existing channels. And maybe I'll stop there and hand over.
Thank you, Chair. As you've outlined, there's a variety of audiences here that we need to consider. We're leading on communications alongside our contractors, but there's obviously the residents of Histon and the surrounding area, there's the businesses that will be affected, and then there's the wider road users who are all coming in and using the road, schools, nurseries, places of worship, so on and so forth. So there's a variety of audiences we need to go to. We're in development of a communications plan that will involve many different channels that we'll use. The most obvious is direct comms, so we'll be continue to talk to the LLF, we'll be holding one-on-one briefings with councillors from various district and city. We'll also be engaging on drop-ins with residents associations. There'll be a public site office with displays of plans and maps and timelines. And of course the primary route, which is a letter which is in draft, ready to go out once we have final approval, where we can set out to the residents most directly affected the next stages of the scheme. And then finally, obviously, indirect and digital comms, where we'll be publicising all of the detail of the scheme as it comes available, and then media, which we will come on to in due course.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
I think the first thing to say is I have huge sympathy for every question that has actually been asked. I mean, we can all feel ourselves into the shoes of the people coming in from the long distance, and you can tell that the questions indicate the considerations that we're trying to balance. So people referring to commuters passing their front doors versus the residents versus the people cycling and coming along there, all essential users in one way or another. And I think we've got to look at this balance. We've got momentary drop-offs on curbs in peak hours. We saw at a meeting we were at yesterday, the data correlates between when the commercial vehicles are trying to drop off or right in the middle of the peak rush hour as well. If we can balance some of those things out, if we can do some enforcement through cameras and digital means that mean we don't have to have people walking up and down streets trying to clear off those momentary drop-offs, many of these things will be helped. We need to find some better ways. We need to make all of these things better for the next generation. So I think in all of these schemes, we will see a short-term hit, which we've got to try and mitigate as much as we can. So any bus planning that we can find out about, people coming in through the guided busway, getting into the centre of town differently, would be a really good thing to do. If we can put on some, dare I say it, Boris bikes or Santander bikes, whatever they are these days, at the outskirts, so that the sixth formers could come in maybe in a slightly different way, there might be some of these things that we can try to mitigate. My question for the system is it actually enough? Will it make enough of a difference? And I think we've spent many years looking at this, and we think it will make quite a big difference. It's likely to be a pendulum swing, I suspect. We have to actually stop people doing things like parking in sensitive places for a while. We can maybe then let the pendulum swing back when we see how it goes at off-peak times. Maybe there are some ways that we can do that. There are a lot of edge cases we're going to see. There are lots of people who will be suffering from the short term, but I do think we need to do it. We do think it's the right thing to do. We've got to actually plan it really carefully to not conflict with the A14, to not conflict with Milton Road. We've got to think through all those cases of where people will actually go, the commuters, the sixth formers, the local residents, but we can't do nothing. I think it's quite clear that it's already in quite a bad state. It's not a very easy place to live right on that junction. So we've got to take a fairly seemingly extreme measure in order to come back to something that works better for everyone. But it's really difficult to do, and I think all the questions, we've got to keep all the good bits. We would love it to be a tree-lined avenue, but to do that, we would have had to take people's front gardens. And I think the conversations that we've been through are that people don't want their front gardens taken away. They don't want that final strip of houses that we all look at and like. I nearly moved into one of them at one point. But we've got to get people in from Cottenham. It's really important that as we grow economically in Cambridge, it means more people trying to get in down these roads. We've got to increase the access, and so we've got to find some sensible ways of doing that. I personally would have taken some of people's front gardens and planted some trees in them, but other people objected to that for obvious reasons, and we just have to find a way around it. There is no way of widening that road without knocking things down, which I don't think we're proposing to do. So I have to say it's very difficult. I think there are lots of challenges here, but we've got to press on, we've got to do something. And this seems to have been the most agreed scheme that we can come up with. So I think we need to really move hard to do this so that for the generation after this one, we've actually got something better.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Councillor Bates.
Most of what I would have been said has been covered by the two previous speakers to start with. Thank you. Okay. Just perhaps one or two beats that hasn't been actually is in respect of the Skanska and the service contract which Cambridge County Council has in procurement. We have very strict procurement regulations which are applied to us. So I can assure residents it has gone through those processes, which goes through all the other processes where the County Council develops things like the Ely Bypass or King's Dyke and those other projects. So we do follow a very strict framework, which is not just used in Cambridgeshire, but it's wider as well. Just to pick up, I think, one of the real issues, actually, I do use the B-bus. Yesterday, I used it. I can see how will it affect me. And I think that comes actually to the bigger question. I think we've spoken about the local liaison forum and the residents, whether they're Milton or Histon. But there is a wider public here. A lot of people come down from Kings Lynn, Littleport, Ely. I come in from St Ives. Okay, so I think there's quite a big communications exercise and plan which must be put in place and communicated to a very, very wide area. It's not just the local area, but it is much bigger than that. Lots of people actually perhaps will have their commute from Ely disrupted for a considerable amount of time. People who come in on the B bus will have a considerable disruption over that time. So I think actually the key to it is the communications and the communications plan which comes in. I think we need to give that extremely high priority as we go forward. I'm very grateful for Peter to give us the information about Highways England, and that is quite crucial. The last thing we need actually is for Highways England to be having a night closure when we start work. That, as far as I'm concerned, is a definite no, thank you very much. So I think we do need to be that coordination with Highways England. We need to coordinate, and I can confirm that there are discussions ongoing with Cambridgeshire County Council about the diversions, about where those diversions might be, how they might work, what the signs might be. Those are ongoing, and obviously with Stagecoach as well. So I think it just comes back actually when all those discussions, as Peter has indicated, are still ongoing. We need to actually communicate when that ongoing is not ongoing, and we have got some firm plans on communications, because that is where it will fall down. I speak from experience in doing major projects throughout the county. Communications is absolutely key when you get to construction. Like what happens if there's an accident somewhere else on the network? Who do we ring? So there are quite a lot of those issues which can be very, very important if there happens to be a car crash on Highways England's network, and that will impact on what happens on the day. So there is that communications with the contractor, with Skanska, with us, and that is absolutely key to it.
Thank you very much. Before I wrap up, do you have any further comments you want to make? No, thank you very much. So obviously we're dealing here with an extremely constrained road and grappling with how to balance all the different users. We've covered, I think, in some good depth, both in the questions and in the debate now, how to deal with some of these aspects, in particular the parking, the southern end, and the relationship with the junctions, the relationship with some of the side roads. Obviously, a major aspect of the discussion has been around the construction phase, the works management, the communications, the bus services. But I think the consensus is that that balance between the different users has been, a correct balance is being struck. So I would, my own particular comment would be about the cycling provision and echoing what Councillor Herbert said about the Gilbert Road junction, which is, I think, a very interesting development in cycling provision in Cambridge. A lot of the rest of the scheme is suffering from the constraints and isn't as satisfactory as we really want cycling provision to be to achieve our ends. But I think that balance has been achieved well. Did you want to make a further? Councillor Bates.
Apologies, actually, because I was going to actually switch the discussion a little bit to the finance and ask Peter a question. We've got the allocated amount. How much is that allocated for contingencies? Because it's not unknown when you get on site that actually something happens and something is discovered, which actually, in hindsight, nobody ever knew anything about. I recall that as a gas main up in Ely. So what are the estimated costs? How much is in what I call the back pocket for something which we know nothing about, Peter?
So there is contingency built into that at the industry standard rate. And if you could ask me for exactly what the number is, then I will get you the answer. But it's built in there as part of the process. Pardon? Apologies. So the contingency is built into the final budget estimate at the industry rate, and I will, as part of the minutes, I will produce the exact number as requested. Pardon? I will, as part of the minutes, okay. We will send that detail.
Yes, we'll follow that up, ensure that is included in the minutes. Thank you. Thank you very much. If there are no further comments, then we can now move on to the recommendations, which are on page 52 of the report, paragraph 2.1. We have 6 recommendations to note the final design, endorse the minor amendments, and agree the proposed traffic regulation orders for Eastern Road, agree the construction and traffic management plans and the communications plan, and then there's approving the final budget estimate and agreeing the award of the construction contract to Skanska as per the County Council's framework. Is everybody agreed with those recommendations at this stage? Okay, thank you very much.
We look forward to seeing the farmers plan.
Yes. Thank you. So there's certainly still a lot of work to do on this. And thank you very much, Mr. Blake and Mr. Bennett, for your inputs. And also, if you could pass on our thanks to the project team for their work on this. And also, in particular, all the community groups, in particular the LLF, who have contributed so much to the scheme. Thank you. So we now move on to the Madingley Road walking and cycling project. Which is, if I get the pages up, on page 173. Apologise on that page. So we have one public question on this item from Angela Chadwick-Healy. Would you be kind enough to come forward to the table here? Good afternoon. Thank you very much for coming. There's a button in the middle of the microphone. If you just press that, and your microphone will turn on. If you press it a bit harder, yep, perfect. Thank you very much. Okay. Yes, do ask a question. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everybody. On behalf of the residents, I would like to start by thanking Paul Rawlinson and the project officers for the inclusive way in which this scheme has been developed so far. I very much hope that this close relationship will continue as the selected scheme develops. There are design issues that we as residents can help with and of which we have a specific understanding. This is our neighbourhood and these are the routes which our community uses on a daily basis. We hope that option 2 is selected. It retains the character of the road, but also allows for bi-directional cycling on the north side of the road. However, I would ask that this design should include more designated crossing places so that residents who live on the south side do not have to cycle too far in an easterly direction before they can travel west. At present, there are no crossing places marked on the stretch west of Clark Maxwell Road to east of Storys Way, but in this section, on the south side, there are a considerable number of houses and flats, as well as side roads leading onto Madingley Road. We would also like to ask that the section between Lady Margaret Road and Northampton Street roundabout is investigated further. In both options, it is virtually unchanged from its current design, and we would urge that ways are sought in which both safe walking and cycling can be delivered in this area. And I would also like to add that I have, since I sent this question in, had email correspondence with Paul Rawlinson, and we are going to meet him in a couple of weeks' time to look at landscape design issues. And we're all really happy with the way that we're being treated at the moment. How about that?
Good. Thank you very much. Very, very nice way to finish your question. Thank you. Thank you. Good. Mr. Blake, do you have any...
I mean, just a sort of short comment. I mean, obviously, one of the reasons to engage in the consultation is to listen to the sort of views and suggestions that come forward, and that's what we very much expect to hear. Just a particular comment around the Lady Margaret Road part of Madingley Road. We're acutely aware that there are significant constraints in that area. We are in discussions with a local landowner that might give us more opportunity in terms of design options going forward. And obviously, as we are continuing our engagement, if we make progress in that area, we'll be conveying that to the local stakeholder group.
Thank you very much. Back to you, Mr. Blake, if you want to make any comments, introductory comments to the report.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, just a couple of short comments, really. So the approach that we've been taking in terms of this scheme is very much taking our learning from schemes such as Histon Road in terms of involving the community. Where we're at in terms of this scheme is having essentially pre-consultation discussions with local residents, local stakeholders, to try and scope and frame the nature of the consultations and scheme design going forward. So hopefully that's set us out on a good footing. It means we're now in a position, subject to your approval, to go out to consultation where we can pick up on some of those design issues that have been raised, and then we can come forward to you with a package of measures to deliver on the ambition of improving cycling along Madingley Road. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. I can now open this out to the board if anyone wants to make any comments on this scheme. Councillor Herbert.
Yeah, I mean, I welcome the fact that we've had a really good engagement with the local community. So that's important. And also, just the nature of the scheme that's coming forward underlines the fact that though there were claims that this could cope with a busway and routes of buses coming down it, it just emphasises that this is actually the best way to make use of the public realm and the limited space there is. So I didn't really hear an answer to the question from Angela about crossing places. And I'm just looking at this design, I don't really see the kind of permeability that I'd expect in terms of being able to cross a busy road. So I appreciate, that's my first question. I mean, in terms of traffic flow, particularly at the M11 end of it, I think we've got a bit of a mess at the moment. So I'm not a frequent driver along this area, but on occasions when I come along it, my secondary question is just in terms of the way that the traffic backs up, including at places like Eddington Avenue and for the park and ride for people who are coming in, I just think it has an impact in terms of the traffic flow of actually having really chunky amounts of cars coming through into this long section, but also I can't see that at the moment we've really got the integration of the lighting and the signalling system at that end. So I know that's secondary to this scheme, but I just think it does impact on the amount of backing up of traffic. And when traffic does start to come through, it just comes through in large queues. But it's very erratic for people. And I just think one of the impacts of that is it produces a lot more air pollution at the more of the northwest Cambridge end. But overall, I welcome the update. I'd like to just have an answer on the request for there being more attention to crossing places, and just a little bit more, Mr. Blake, about the options, given that there's been a clear support from the local residents for option 2.
Blake.
So in terms of options, far be it from me to predetermine a consultation, because that's why we're going out. The crossing issue, which I'm sure will be raised as part of the consultation, it is essentially, it's Histon Road all over again. It is, how do we want to use that space, and what do we give priority to? And there's an entirely justifiable argument to say we put more crossings in, but the compromise for that is felt by a lot of the users of that corridor, whereas the crossings benefit certain other users of the corridor. So that's why we've got to a stage, I think, with the stakeholder group where we now want to go out, present some options, and really get a sense of what people think are the particular priorities. More crossings, slower traffic, less crossings, faster traffic, and people will have a different view on what benefits that. It does link to your point in terms of the end as we go further out towards the M11. So Madingley Road, like very many of the roads, radial roads within the city, is a car-dominated, constrained environment. The signalling system that exists at the moment tries to best manage that. We are working with Ian and county colleagues on signalling systems generally, as you know, in another project, as to how we can improve that and improve the flow. What we need to ensure is, and be clear about, is what are we improving the flow for? Are we improving the flow to allow more cars in? Or coming full circle to your crossing question, or are we improving the flow to give greater priority to public transport, walking, cycling in our urban realm aspirations? So these projects that appear separate at the moment will come together as we go forward with the Madingley Road cycling scheme. I hope that's helpful, Chair.
Yes, it is indeed. Thank you very much. Claire Ruskin.
I cycle along this route very frequently. It's, apart from anything else, between my place of work and Shire Hall, which I have to spend far too much time in these days. Not too much time, obviously, just the right amount of time. And I also drive along the road very frequently. I don't walk as often as many people, I suspect, in the audience might do. I feel the balance is going to be really difficult to address. In particular, I feel hugely privileged that I am able to cycle or walk along there, because it means I'm within range of something quite close by. I always err to the side of prioritising the people who've got to travel in from a long way away, because the congestion on that road is immense, and every morning and every afternoon that road is completely clogged up. So I think whilst we could put lots of lovely residential crossings in, my feeling is that, as in East Road, in the middle of Cambridge, it so blocks up the traffic if you put too many crossings in. I'm not trying to preempt any discussion we have, but we've got to be really wary of being fair to the people who are coming in from a long way outside, as well as those of us who are lucky enough to be in there right in the middle.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of points to Angela. I think first, please keep talking to Paul. Okay, I'm glad to hear that you're going to meet him, because I think that will be very constructive and useful for both of you to understand your issues as well. In respect of the signals around Eddington, when the university put all those in, they didn't work well at all. I came that route from Shire Hall today, just now, or just maybe a few hours now. So I did have quite a bit of conversations with the traffic signallers manager at that point. They had to go out and tweak them more than once, about 3 or 4 times, okay, which is not uncommon when you put new traffic lights in, by the way, in having to readjust them when you actually see them actually working, particularly around the park and ride and where the university put them in. So we did have quite a bit of discussion with with Richard Ling, who is the traffic signals gentleman that deals with it. There is quite an issue with the traffic both getting onto the M11 and coming off the M11, because that actually further down there, that is a bit of an issue, as you might say. In my view, because I do go home that way, driving, I come in on the B bus often, but don't come down Histon Road driving. I do go much more down towards St Neots, okay. So I think also remember that the Highways England are going to be doing a project which is now approved to upgrade between Caxton, Gibbet and the Black Hat. And I suspect the amount of development which is on that road, further completely out of the Greater Cambridge area, but in places like St Neots and further afield in places like Milton Keynes, that will generate a lot more traffic coming in on that particular route. So I think I'm quite content with it going out for consultation. But there is perhaps a wider picture here as well when we're doing projects, because if you look about the people who come in from St Neots or Milton Keynes, not in our area, but the question earlier was about communications, and maybe we need to broaden our horizons a little bit further than just the GCP area in some of our projects.
Thank you very much. So this is an interesting contrast with Histon Road. It is constrained in its ways, but significantly less constrained, and does allow for some very interesting the cycle provision to be proposed in these 2 options for the consultation. And it's interesting how that we're able to do something, a consultation that has quite different options. I mean, one thing in particular that I'm very excited to see is a valiant attempt to solve the problem of Eddington Avenue for pedestrians and cyclists. So it is one of these large and unattractive junctions around the Cambridge fringes that have been put in recent years, and this could be a considerable improvement. So I hope that we get some good feedback in the consultation that will allow us to proceed with a very good scheme on this. So if there are no further comments, I think we can go to the recommendations, which are on page 173 of the report. So we have 3 recommendations to note the progress made working with the residents, which we have underlined how positive that has been. And approve the proposed consultation and the milestones as set out in the report. Is everyone happy with that proposal? All agreed? Aye. Good. Okay, thank you very much indeed. So, final point, our next meeting is on Thursday, the 12th of December, back here in South Cambridgeshire. Councillor Waterspoon.
Yes, I mean, I don't want to prolong the meeting, but of course, at the Joint Assembly meeting, the Chief Executive gave a brief update on the Citizens' Assembly. And I know the board is being kept abreast of developments in other ways, but I just wondered whether, for the sake of the public present and the video record, there might be an opportunity to say
seems like a very good idea. So the final weekend is this weekend. I will be attending part of it. I don't know if you...
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. We didn't plan this, did we? Yes, this weekend, the Citizens' Assembly, which has been put together as part of the government's Innovation in Democracy programme. So we are one of 3 pilots happening across the country, but we're the first one actually that's undertaking a Citizens' Assembly on the topic of how do we improve public transport, reduce congestion and improve air quality in Greater Cambridge. So through a process that was run independently of us, the Sortition Foundation selected 60 people from a search that involved sending letters out to 10,000 residents of the travel to work area, so not just Greater Cambridge. They then were assessed against a range of demographic criteria, as well as their travel modes and other relevant data for that topic. They met for the first time for a Saturday and Sunday about 3 weeks ago. They meet again this weekend for 2 days. The first weekend, they really considered the context, the issues, the problems, what we're trying to grapple with, and heard from a range of both experts and community stakeholders on what they thought the solution should be. This weekend, they will be getting into a lot more detail about what different measures and interventions may be possible, and they will get to vote on a set of recommendations that will then come to the board via the Joint Assembly's meeting in November to the next board meeting on the 12th of December. So we don't know what that process will deliver to us, but that is the point. It is a very much our sort of, as much as you hear at these meetings about a range of engagement, and I think we've had a lot of positive feedback about the engagement that we undertake, this takes us into another form of, you know, much more well, trying a new way of democratising the decisions that you make. So it'll be interesting to have the evaluation on both the process as well as see what the output from the Citizens' Assembly is.
Thank you very much. That's a very helpful update. Thank you. Right, I will now make another attempt to close the meeting, and we will meet back here in a little over 2 months' time. Thank you very much for coming.